Women for Women podcast.
پادکست زنان برای زنان.
ښځو لپاره د ښځو پودکاسټ.
Hello and welcome, dear listeners. I'm Nazifa Jalali, and you're listening to the Women for Women podcast. This is a space where women share their own stories in their own voices, stories of courage, resilience, and hope. In this podcast, you'll hear from women who have faced discrimination, threats, torture, and many difficult challenges, yet continue to stand strong and move forward. Every episode is a reminder that behind every struggle is a woman who choose courage over fear and hope over silence. Welcome to another episode of Women for Women podcast, a space where we bring forward the voices and experiences and untold stories of women. Today we are honored to have with us Miss Manizha Bakhtari, an Afghan diplomat, writer, and advocate, whose journey reflects on one of the most defining moments in Afghanistan's recent history. Her story is not only about diplomacy and public service, it is a story of identity, courage, responsibility, and resilience in the face of profound change. Through this conversation, we will look back at the moments that shaped her journey, the challenges after August 2021, and her reflections on the future of Afghan women. Ms. Bakhtari, welcome to the Women for Women podcast, and thank you for being with us today. First of all, if you can briefly introduce yourself and tell us about your journey before August 2021. I know most of Afghans, they know you, but I wanted to hear from you if you can introduce yourself to us and our listeners.
Hi and salam, and thank you for having me on the Women for Women podcast. And it's really a pleasure for me to be part of this podcast. And also, I want to extend my sincere thanks to everyone who might listen and engage with this episode. So it's really difficult to talk about myself, but I try to say a few words. So this is Manizha Bakhtari, and I was born in Kabul city. Let me tell you a few words about the Kabul. I remember, because that was different from the city as it's often described today, and we see it today. At that time, when I was like a young girl, it felt smaller and and more closely connected, and people knew each other, and everyday life was different from today. But anyway, my childhood was shaped in a very different environment. Because we were living in a large, vibrant household with my uncles, cousins, and constant activity, and that actually I feel that shaped my future. And throughout my career, I have worked in different fields and gained experience across different fields like journalism, education, diplomacy, and public service. And I studied journalism and literature and completed also several non-degree courses related to diplomacy, democracy, human rights, and gender studies. And but I began my professional journey as a journalist and later worked as a teacher. And although only that jobs was like for a very short period of time due to the uncertainty and war in Afghanistan. But my very, very first major job was serving as a lecturer at the journalism faculty of Kabul University. And in addition to academia, I worked with NGOs and television stations before joining the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Afghanistan. And over the past years, I would say since 2007, I have been serving in Afghanistan's Foreign Service and currently hold the position of Ambassador and Permanent Representative of Afghanistan to YANA and international organizations. And alongside my professional work, I have published a couple of books in the fields of journalism and literature. That's all I can tell in short about my career.
Thank you, Manizha. It's such an amazing introduction. And see, this is the power of Afghan women. And today, the Taliban, they want to put all restrictions on women and they are against women. But this is the power of Afghan women, especially. And Manizha, you mentioned a bit about Kabul, but when you think back to August 2021, what is the first memory that comes to your mind?
Yeah, Nazifa John, when I look back at August 2021, many memories come to my mind. But, the strongest image of the strongest images of the years that came before it, when I returned to Afghanistan after 2001, because on the first period of the Taliban, we were immigrated to Pakistan. And after 2001, I came back to Afghanistan and I carried with me many dreams. I wanted to study, to learn, and to witness my country's progress. And returning after the darkest period under the Taliban, was a moment of great joy and hope for me. And at that time, I honestly did not know what the future would hold for Afghanistan after 2 decades of democracy, this time of the Taliban, but I was deeply inspired by the sense of renewal and possibility that surrounded us. I remember, on those days, I'm not just talking about 2020 or 2019 or something. I'm looking back to that or to those years of democracy in Afghanistan. And I remember the sense of progress in my country. And I was part of that, part of that journey day after day from early morning until late evening. I worked alongside thousands of other women and men, millions, who were committed to building a more stable, democratic, and free Afghanistan. And if I talk about one specific image, one image remains especially outstanding. And that was, thousands of girls walking to school in their black uniforms and white skirts. And, when I was go to my office, I saw those girls and their faces filled with joy and hope, and their smiles would stay with me throughout the day and give me a meaning, give me to a meaning. And for me, that is the most powerful memory of Afghanistan before 2021. And also, the energy of the civil society, and the media and the optimism and determination of its people. I know that we had a lot of problems at the time and challenges. I'm not saying that everything was kind of butter and honey. Of course, there were so many challenges, but we had hope and we knew that we were on the right path and we were struggling and we were fighting to reach to a better point, to have a better Afghanistan,
Thank you so much for sharing all these thoughts with us. But where were you when you learned that Kabul had fallen, and how did that moment affect you personally and professionally?
Yeah, I started my new position in January 2021. And when Kabul collapsed, I was in Vienna serving as Afghanistan's ambassador to Austria and also as permanent representative to international organizations. And there I was in a position of responsibility, and I felt proud to represent my country and my people in Vienna, at the heart of global diplomacy in a city. And Vienna is very special in diplomatic family. And at that time, I was fully engaged in my work. There had been warnings and reports, and even beyond rumors, there were clear signs in the news that Afghanistan might face a dramatic shift, including the withdrawal of the United States. And I was aware of all these developments, but I still believe that these institutions we had built over 2 decades, the armed forces, civil society, free media, parliament, and especially, a young and dynamic generation would be strong enough to prevent a complete collapse. It was difficult to imagine that 20 years of democracy could simply just vanish. But on the day, August 15, on the day everything changed, I couldn't forget that day. I was sitting in a cafe with a colleague of mine with his wife, because we had a really difficult time and we wanted to have a private time just to chat about everything. And they had invited me out out because of that, like having like a change of environment. And while we were sitting together, I was scrolling through social media when I saw the first report, like President Ghani had left and Kabul had fallen. I could not believe it. I kept reading and scrolling and refreshing my search engine, and until images and videos began to appear in my cell phone. And in that moment, I was overwhelmed. I broke down in tears without thinking about my position or my status or my age, like a woman. Like I was just like kind of crying, and I left the cafe and rushed back to my apartment, shaking and in a state of shock. And for hours, I could not process what had happened. I'm not ashamed to tell you that today, because that was really difficult for me to adjust it. And I simply walked back and forth, pacing and trying to make sense of a new reality that felt impossible. And in the days that followed, of course, I managed to slowly put together my pieces again. I mean, like to gather myself again. I made like a very, I would say, conscious decision to continue working and to remain committed, even if I could not accept this new reality. Because, what had happened was not merely a political transition or a change of government. It was not like that, okay, yeah, the other political parties there, and I'm not agreeing with them, so blah, blah. But, it felt like a complete transformation of Afghanistan from hope to darkness. I mean, from a sense of possibility to deep uncertainty. And yeah, that was the difficult moment. I'm glad that we passed that dark days, but the consequences are still with us. The result is still there. I mean, like, of course, I'm not on that state of shock, but every day I see and I face the consequences of that day.
Yeah, but Manija, well, an interesting coincidence. I also started my last job in January 2021, and the arrival of the Taliban brought experiences and emotions that I will never forget. And I understand that your mission was political, and I can imagine how difficult that must have been. But as an Afghan woman, a diplomat, and an Afghan, what have been the biggest challenges you have faced since 2021?
Well, many challenges. I mean, because it was not an easy transition. And I mean, in terms of my embassy, there were many difficulties and moments of isolation. In the early months, the international environment was extremely challenging. Many were unwilling to engage. Even basic diplomatic interactions like a hi were kind of avoided. And there was a sense that the world had moved on. I mean, the world had moved and the Taliban is reality, and there is no other government or no other power. And, but I had to persist. I had to build a space for a voice that refused to disappear. I had to make it clear that I represent Afghanistan, not the Taliban, and that I would continue to speak for the rights and dignity of my people, especially women and girls. Yeah, I mean, like many challenges I can talk about, because politically I had to redefine my position on the international stage and in a bilateral relation, and to prove myself. And as I became more determined to challenge the Taliban's policies, it was important for me to build, a new narrative, new relations with diplomats in international forums. And it took me, almost 1 year. For 1 year, I consistently raised my voice across different platforms until, gradually diplomat began to listen. Over time, not only were my concerns heard, but my work was also increasingly acknowledged and appreciated, not only in relation to Afghanistan and human rights, but also in broader global discussions. And, you couldn't believe that in many cases, diplomats tend to come to me and appreciate my work, although they are not saying anything. I mean, when they have the floor, they are calm. But individually they come to me and they appreciate my work, that because I'm talking about human rights, about fight for democracy and justice, and that is a global fight, and now I see that many delegations engage with my work, and I'm invited to a wide range of international platforms, and I'm deeply grateful also to Austria and to civil society here for this support. I kind of transform challenge to a possibility. And also, I had great moments in Austria, because, through my activities, there were moments when I would walk through the city and see posters related to a documentary that I'm the main character there, and I see my posters around the city. And, it was kind of like brilliant experience, because despite all the challenges, I could have managed to move in a meaningful and constructive direction. But there are several other challenges. One of the most significant, that we have lost our voting rights in several international organizations due to unpaid annual contributions, and as a result, in institutions such as the IAEA or UNIDO and others, Afghanistan has not been able to maintain its financial commitments, so we don't have a right to vote. And in addition, there are countries that do not maintain any formal contact with us. At the beginning, there was also open criticism from some states. For example, Russia delegation questioned or objected my work and my statements in several occasions, mainly at the OSCE. But over time, however, the situation has become, more stable, and even such objections have largely now subsided. But of course, the broader structure challenge remains. We do not have a recognized government in exile. We do not have a unified political framework or organized oppositions that can serve as a clear institutional backbone. In many ways, myself and a number of other diplomats, we continue our work in isolation without that collective structure behind us. And that raises an important question. I always ask this question, like maybe many times a day: where does this path lead? We continue to speak, to engage, and to advocate, but the long-term direction remains uncertain. The lack of a clear framework or political base or anchor is perhaps the most fundamental challenge we face today. We should have had such a thing, and unfortunately, over the past 5 years, collectively, we haven't managed to have such a backbone. And another major challenge has been financial, of course. When the government collapsed, we were left without institutional support while still carrying the responsibility of an embassy. And just to make it short, at the time, our embassy cost, that was a rental apartment, and cost around 11,000 euros per month. And we did not even have 500 euros available to cover it. And we had no choice but to terminate the contract. And in Europe, there is a rule that you cannot just terminate your contract, and you have to inform the owner at least 3 months before. But the property owner was kind and cooperative and agreed to an immediate cancellation. But that was not the case in my residence, and I had to move because that was also very expensive, like 5,000-6,000 euro, I don't know, but that was an arrangement by previous ambassadors. And they did not give us the advance payment that we had with them, So anyway, that loss after loss. And also my diplomats, many of them, they had to leave. We had to lay off our local employees. And I can keep talking about that for hours, but I stop here because we have many, many challenges in everyday work.
Thank you, Manizha, for sharing this. What I find powerful in your experiences is the contrast between personal recognition and the larger political challenges. And seeing your story represented in the city shows the impact of individual efforts. But at the same time, the loss of representation and voting rights highlights the broader consequences of Afghanistan's current situation. You mentioned these challenges and different challenges, of course. Was there a moment when you felt uncertain about the future? What helps you move forward?
First and foremost, I'm a human being with all doubts, highs, and ups and downs that come with it, And there are days when I ask myself what all of this leads to. whether we are moving forward at all or whether we have failed despite years of effort, democracy, and sacrifice. And in those moments, discouragement feels very real. I'm down and I'm like, what shall I do today? But meanwhile, there are also many other days when I wake up with renewed hope. I remind myself that I have responsibilities and that I still have a platform, and I'm lucky to have this platform. Why I should complain? Why I'm down? I have this big platform. I'm recognized. I'm like, I'm in Vienna, and this platform carries weight. And I know that as an individual voice, I might not always be heard. That is an ugly fact. But when I speak from a position of responsibility and representation, people listen, and that gives meaning to continue, and that gives me strength to have this platform and to go another step. And I often say that we cannot afford to lose hope. That is my main sentence that I use this in all my public speeches, that we cannot afford to lose hope. I remain fundamentally hopeful and focused on the future. And I'm convinced that darkness is never permanent, and that one day, whether in my lifetime or in the next generations, Afghanistan will find its way back. It's not only about us today, it's about the generations to come, about democracy, freedom, and a free Afghanistan for the future, for the next generations. And even if I'm not able to return in my own for now, I don't know what would happen, but I continue this struggle because hope itself must be sustained across generations. And at the same time, it's important to recognize that the challenges Afghanistan faces are not limited to the Taliban alone. You are from Afghanistan, and as a woman, I'm sure that you know all the facts and the history. And issues of women's rights and human rights have deep historical roots. Even in the absence of the Taliban, many of these struggles would persist. Because Afghanistan has long been shaped by patriarchal structures and complex social realities. And this is not a new struggle. It's one that has continued for more than a century. And so the responsibility to advocate for democracy and justice must also continue consistently and persistently. And, our history shows that when engagement, and not only our history, the world history shows that when engagement stops, justice kind of disappearing. For me, this work is not like a moment in time, but a long continuation of efforts. And that's what I do. And that keeps me moving.
Yeah, thank you, Manizha. Your message about not losing hope is very powerful, and I think it also shows that resilience is not the absence of doubt. It is the decision to continue despite those doubts. How have these experiences changed your understanding of resilience and leadership?
Nazifa John, honestly, since the collapse, I have changed in many ways. I'm no longer the same person I was before. Earlier in my career, I often felt the need to navigate carefully and balance different expectations, especially as a woman in a senior government position. That was difficult for me to keep the balance, and I was struggling for that. There were many unspoken rules about how to speak, how to act, how to represent yourself, even about your appearance, and how to ensure that everyone felt comfortable with you. And in a sense, I had to manage multiple sensitivities at once. But today, I no longer feel bound by those constraints, because I feel that my job or my responsibility is bigger and then those kind of I don't know if I call that stupid thinking or norms, but anyway, now my priorities have become much clear, and I focus more directly on what I believe is right. I do not feel that I have anything personal to lose in the same way, because as a woman, I see that I do not have any value in my society. In Afghanistan, not in my society, but in Afghanistan under the Taliban rule. And that gives me power to speak and to lead and to have new approaches towards my leadership. So I try to use my position and my voice in the most meaningful way I can. And I'm more decisive now, more determined, and very firm in my positions. Nothing easily shifts my principles anymore. At the same time, as a diplomat, I continue to believe in dialogue, negotiation, and peaceful engagement. I'm not against that. But I also believe that these only have values when they are grounded in clear principles. Without principles and values, dialogue loses its meaning. Even some people, when they talk about negotiation with the Taliban, I'm not against that, but we should set our boundaries and we should talk about our principles. Without principles, nothing has a value. And, people in Vienna often ask me whether I'm afraid, given how vocal I am and the risk that may come with it. But of course, risk always exists, but the fear does not guide my decisions and my leadership. And what has changed in me is a deeper sense of determination and clarity about what I'm doing and what I stand for, regardless of the circumstances.
Yeah, thank you, Manizha. Your reflections shows that leadership is not only about a position, it's also about how challenges transform the way we see our responsibility and our voice. And now I have a question, and the question have two parts. You continued representing Afghanistan during a period of profound uncertainty. What did that responsibility mean to you? And what were some of the most difficult decisions or moments you faced in your role after August 2021?
Yeah, Nazifa John, I take my responsibilities very seriously, even though I do not have a government or a formal chain of command behind me in the way that existed before. From early in the morning, I'm working, attending conferences, participating in meetings, speaking at public events, and engaging in different platforms. And almost, every week I have at least one public speech, and I'm genuinely, grateful to Vienna and to the diplomatic and civil society space here for providing me with the opportunity to continue. And, at this stage, I feel I'm carrying a particularly heavy responsibility. Within the framework of the previous government's diplomatic structure, I'm currently the only woman ambassador still actively serving in this capacity alongside one other female diplomat, which is my co-worker here. But if you look to other embassies who do not work with the Taliban, we do not have any female diplomat anymore. And of course, the embassies who work with the Taliban, of course, they do not have any woman. And, together, we are among the last remaining female diplomats. And I'm also very aware that many of my female colleagues, some of whom are more experienced and more highly qualified than I am, are no longer able to serve in their roles. Some have had to leave their positions and others are unable to work as diplomats. And despite, they have this education and expertise. And that makes me even more aware of the responsibility I carry. It's not something I take lightly. It's a duty I continue to uphold with seriousness and commitment, because I feel that I must carry it forward for as long as I'm able. And the difficult decisions I had made, that was the second part of the question, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, the decisions I made, although all the decisions I made, although it was taken collectively within the Ambassador's Council, we have an Ambassador Councils constituted with those ambassadors and diplomats who do not work with the Taliban. So, but it was still a very difficult for me personally, because I'm functioning without a government. It's a very unique position in the diplomat history, and that of course imposes challenges and put me in a position to make decisions without having a boss or a government. So when it comes to voting and siding with the government, I'm not taking those decisions because it's beyond my capacity. But for continuing my mission and my positions, every day I have to make difficult decisions. Every day, I couldn't talk about one single or merely about one sole decision. decisions. I don't know how history will judge these decisions because, but at the time we felt we had no alternative but to take steps that would allow us to continue existing and to preserve the principles we stood for during the period of republic. I mean, there are many people, of course, that support us, but there are many other people who do not support us, and I see that. I receive letters, I receive texts, I receive messages through social media that who are you? You are not the representative of the people of Afghanistan. You don't have a government and you are not appointed by the Taliban. So who you are, I mean, like, that's a big question. Yes, who I am. I have kept this platform and I'm talking every day on behalf of Afghanistan, on behalf of the women of Afghanistan. But what comforts me is like, I'm all my work and involvements based on principles, human rights, women rights, and also the Constitution of Afghanistan, which is still trustworthy for me, which gives me guidance for my everyday work. But still, there is no institutional comfort or infrastructures around us, and and that makes our decisions so difficult. But I have to make all those decisions every day about my colleagues, about my mission, about the rents, about the bills, about the payments, about the statements. I mean, more importantly, about my statements that every day I make in international platforms. And that's a big responsibility. And hopefully the history of Afghanistan judges in a fair way,
Amazing, Manizha. I'm really impressed by your story, and your story shows that leadership is sometimes tested most when formal structures disappear, and what remains is commitment, responsibility, and the courage to continue. But despite all the challenges, what stories of Afghan women have inspired you over the past few years?
The past few years have been tough for all women and girls, and actually all people of Afghanistan inside. And what inspires me most are the women and girls of Afghanistan themselves. I'm sorry, but I'm very much focused on women and girls of Afghanistan. And I think, first of all, about the early months. When girls and women talked to the streets of Kabul to protest, and I was deeply proud of them. And at the same time, profoundly shaken, by the risk they faced. And even under direct threat and in moments when they were met with violence, they continued to stand up and raise their voices. And that courage left a lasting impact on me. And actually, the director of the last Ambassador documentary, which is focused on me, used a couple of those moments when our girls were demonstrating on Kabul cities. And whenever I look to those moments, and then it shakes me, and also it gives me a moment to be proud, And also I'm equally inspired by the thousands of our women in the diaspora, Every day they continue their struggles in different forms. They organize demonstrations, they engage with parliaments, they write letters, and they speak in public forums, and they move from one institution to another. Consistently, they raise awareness, and they demand attention for women's rights in Afghanistan. And I'm so proud of them. And these are the moments that I keep it in mind. And I believe that what connects all of this is a powerful sense of solidarity and determination. And I see that it is this continuation across borders and circumstances, and that gives me strength and reminds me why this work matters.
I think what is powerful in your reflection it is that you see Afghan women not only as victims of a crisis, but as a source of courage, leadership, and hope. We are in the last moments of the podcast, and I have two more questions. In your view, what role can Afghan women play in shaping the future of Afghanistan?
I strongly believe that women are the major players in a society. You know, women are the backbone of any society. They are the foundation of democracy, peace, and sustainable development. And without women's active participation, no country can truly progress everywhere. And no country can have like a lasting stability or peace. And this is why women's inclusion in decision making at every level is essential, whether in international councils, regional dialogues, or intra Afghanistan discussions. You know, everyone, women must be present not as symbolic participants, but as central actors, as those who shape outcomes and policies. So, women's participation and women's contributions are so important and vital. And I mean, like in every field, in politics, in medicine, in judiciary system, in education, in parliament, and beyond. And their leadership is not limited only to one rule or one sector. You know, it's fundamental to the functioning of society as a whole, and that should apply to Afghanistan. It's so important that we apply all these contributions to Afghanistan. But unfortunately, right now, we are facing a stark reality that, I mean, like a dark reality that our women are not participating in the society and the economy the way they should. They are erased from the society. They are banned from participation and from education. But I mean, that is the narrative the Taliban created. That is not our reality. That's not our narrative. And we have to all together, we have to make our narratives. We have to continue our fight to reclaim our space, our positions, and our participation in the society. And of course, as women of Afghanistan, we do not have one voice, you know, because like there are, and that is like very natural. There are political differences and diverse perspectives as in any society. I mean, but when it comes to fundamental rights, especially women's participation and equality, I mean, there is a strong sense of unity and shared commitment among us. And political differences belong in democratic process and elections, and where I mean, like when we have this democratic process and we have an election, of course we come with our different political views for the future of Afghanistan. But right now, despite all the challenges, we are together, and I believe the solidarity will continue to grow, and women will remain at the forefront of the struggle against exclusion and gender-based oppression and gender apartheid. And also, they are the main player of the society, whether the Taliban accept it or not. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah, thank you so much, Manizha. Your point is very important. Excluding women is not only a women's issue, it is a societal issue. A country cannot fully develop when half of its population is prevented from contribution. And my last question, Manizha, from you is looking ahead, what kind of Afghanistan do you hope to see in the next 10 years? And what message would you like to leave for young Afghan women today?
Well, first of all, let me add that women's issue is a security issue as well. You know, it's not only about the human rights. It's a security issue, and the world should collectively address this human rights crisis in Afghanistan as a security matter. You know, that is very important to, I mean, for all of our struggles and involvement to lead this civil engagement and also our human rights activity towards the security, because that is the security issue. And now I'm kind of forgotten about the question. Sorry if you just repeat it again.
I wanted to have your reflections on what kind of Afghanistan do you hope to see in the next 10 years, and what message would you like to leave for young Afghan women?
Yeah, so what is my dream and imagination for Afghanistan? You know, what I imagine is a free country where everyone is equal, where every person, despite of his or her political belief, despite of gender, race, like cultural differences or tribes or whatever, every person can exercise their rights and play a meaningful role in society. I imagine an Afghanistan governed by a constitution and the rule of law, a country built on lawful institutions, clear systems and accountable governance, a place where democratic institutions are strong and functional, and where justice is not an idea, but a lived reality of the people's life. And in this Afghanistan, you know, girls would go back to school without restrictions, and women would fully participate in every aspect of public life, and they would contribute as leaders, professionals, educators, and decisions makers. That is my imagination for Afghanistan. The foundations for Afghanistan, for the future of Afghanistan is peace, democracy, and justice, and without inequality. And without these, sustainable development is not possible. You know, peace is not possible. And that is my imagination for Afghanistan. My message for women of Afghanistan is, please do not lose hope. Please do not lose your motivation. You know, that is very important, to keep motivation and to keep hope. I know it's difficult. I know it's not easy. I'm talking, you know, from a place of comfort. I'm sitting here in front of my laptop in Vienna. It's difficult. I know that it sounds like kind of, you know, unreal, but my message is like, please, please do not lose hope or motivation. I know how long and difficult this period has been for you. I know that at times it may feel as if there are no resources, no opportunities, and no clear window into the future. But I also know your strength. I know that you're strong. I see it and I believe in it. You have already shown resilience in ways that are remarkable. You continue to find ways to endure, to learn, and to resist in your own ways, you know, even under the most difficult circumstances. And that strength, that power is real and it matters.
Thank you so much, Manizha, for sharing your story and your reflections with us. Stories like yours remind us that history is not only written through events, but through the voices and experiences of the people who lived through them. To our listeners, if you have a story, experience, or a perspective that you would like to share, we invite you to connect with us through the Women for Women podcast website. Until next time, keep listening, keep sharing, and keep amplifying women's voices.